It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Natalie Knight, a very close and dear friend, and it gives me such pleasure to hear your talk this evening. Natalie has coined the phrase art a biography, and the book is The Big Picture, and we're going to hear this incredible book that Natalie has written, but your life story, your incredible life story.
Thank you, Lex. Well, good evening, and tonight I'm going to talk about turning difficult corners in life and business. And there'll be extracts from our book, The Big Picture. It was very interesting because I found that people are more interested in hearing about struggles than about success. I was actually shocked into this realization when I heard someone saying that, Natalie Knight, she's never had to struggle with anything in her life. While it's true, and I am very grateful that I've been very blessed with lots of good things in my life, nothing in life comes without a struggle. So my story begins with a biography written by Lana Jacobson, which she calls Unstoppable. She interviewed several people, even those that didn't like me. I was quite surprised to hear this, but that's life. They tell the truth about my shortcomings and weaknesses. I had former partners, and they didn't gloss over our arguments, and their interviews were incorporated. And I called it my autobiography because it wasn't just an autobiography. I didn't write it myself. It was written by Lana Jacobson, and I then added in all the parts about the art, which is why I thought that that was a more suitable way to describe it. I'm very grateful to a friend of ours called Joy Manny. She's a former South African, and she's now an international author. I asked her for help, and I asked her to read the first draft of my book, and she was very frank, and she said, I don't like it. She said it's too self-effacing, and she said you have got to find the heroine. Well, this was a bit embarrassing. So I explained to her, Joy, I'm not a heroine. But her reply was, find the heroine or give up the idea of writing the book. Because if you don't think you've done anything exceptional or interesting, nobody else will either. She spurred me to write about the difficulties as well as the successes. And Joy's response in the end was very encouraging. She mentioned that I had she saw something that I actually had not seen. And she actually projected a title for a new book that she wanted us to write together. She called it Turning Difficult Corners in Life. And that is the theme I want to talk about tonight. She was very enthusiastic about the big picture and said that she felt that it was now very interesting. And to quote her, she said, it's a marvelous book. I was riveted from the first page and devoured it. Its truthfulness opens the soul. You dared to develop, to jump without a safety net, to leave success and begin new things. That was a fantastic response after her original criticism. So, thanks to Joy, I've identified 4 major corners which I turned without even knowing what I was doing at the time. The first is when I matriculated at 16. The second is my creative life as a journalist and a playwright. The third is my career from businesswoman and gallerist with many twists and turns. And the fourth, and most difficult of all, was giving it all up, becoming Shomeret Shabbat. Like many of my generation, I lived through World War II, a Holocaust, and apartheid. I had near-death experiences, a plaster of Paris cast on my arm, several operations, lots of sickness, my own and my father's. When I was 16, my sweetheart, who I'd been going out with for 4 years, was taken away from me by his father, who stated that he was not old enough for a relationship. I mean, he was 17 already and I was 16. We were definitely old enough. I just passed my matric, and so it was a very devastating time for me. Because my father had not been well, my mother insisted that I study law, where I could earn £10 a month as an articled clerk. They could not afford to send me to university to study a BA in journalism, which is what I wanted to do. A few months later, though, I felt as though my life was completely over, when my father was torn away from me after a third and fatal heart attack. This was 6 days after my 17th birthday. My father's death left me traumatized. I felt completely abandoned and rejected by the two men I'd loved most in the whole world. I'd no experience in dealing with trauma. My mother, a widow at the age of 41, needed my support and comfort. So did my younger siblings. I had no one to turn to, and there was no one to comfort me. I had a very close friend who was an unbelievable support, but I turned inward and I tried to withdraw from the world. I didn't enjoy my law studies. I had to get up early and go to work as an articled clerk in a law firm. I am not a morning person. I can work until 2 a.m. in the morning, but don't wake me up at 7 a.m. in the morning. Having worked the whole day, I then had to leave at 4 p.m. From work and then go to university for about 2 hours where we had part-time lectures. My father used to fetch me after the lectures. After his death, some of my fellow students who were over 18 would give me a lift home. I was in mourning and didn't go to movies or dances. I developed neuralgia, diagnosed as toothache, and lost 4 back teeth. I developed trichotomia, pulling out my hair, creating a bald spot. I still have a perfect view of myself sitting in the corner of my east-facing bedroom at a small desk which I shared with my sister. I was a reclusive, thin teenager sitting in my bedroom. One day your prince will come, my mother encouraged me. But how did I turn the corner? I think it was action, activity, and working towards a goal that saved me. Because I worked so hard, I did well in my exams. I didn't go out. I had nothing to do. I had to focus on my work. I and one of the other students received distinctions, and we were in line for the law prize, which would be awarded at the end of 3 years. This achievement went a long way towards enabling me to break out of my misery. I wanted to show those professors that the only girl in the class whom they ignored, despised, and denigrated, that I was one of the top students. I had developed a need for recognition, and fulfilling this need helped me to ease the pain of the abandonment. I had turned the first difficult corner. I did it subconsciously, unwittingly, but I felt driven to heal myself by making other people recognize my value and worth, even though I didn't believe it myself. Nothing can make up for the loss of a parent, and it changed me. But it is the natural way of the world, and we learn to mourn and move on with life. A few months later, I had to turn another corner. I accepted an invitation to a tennis party in Ruhrport. My mother had promised me a prince. Was the Sleeping Beauty going to be resuscitated with a kiss from a prince on a white horse and a golden sword? I met my saviour in September 1955. Picture this scene. Here he is wearing short white pants, white sneakers, which encase the feet of his short white legs, a white peaked cap, and a white t-shirt, through which an arm brandished a tennis racket. He was not even adept with this weapon, and I vanquished him. Sixth love at first sight. But to my astonished delight, my knight in shiny white tennis togs proves to be a red-blooded male who transports me to a land that I had never even dreamed of. It is a land of culture and art, of poetry and power, theatrical, dramatic, spiritual, and meaningful. He is my soulmate, and he and I create a dynasty of descendants and a cultural legacy in South Africa, the land of our birth. This is my husband, Zami Lignatsky, who I married when I was 19, 61 years ago. I didn't know he was my knight until I cut off the lick and the ski in Lichnatski. He is the catalyst, and everything that followed has been because of his love, guidance and support. We got married on September the 1st. It feels like yesterday. In addition to our children, we also created my first play, Balmy Days, starring Sarah Sylvia. He was the photographer when we researched the beadwork and the patterns of the underbelly, and he accompanied me in my role as theatre critic for the Jewish Report and Sunday Express. The second corner begins in New York, which proved to be pivotal in my life. New York is a place of energy, creativity, unpredictability, throbbing with life. 1968 was the year that my love affair with New York began. I was bitten by the theatre bug after the Jewish Guild presented my first play, Balmy Days. New York theatre was at an all-time high. There were plays like Hair, Man of La Mancha, Fiddler on the Roof, and these were all these fantastic shows that were on Broadway, and we went to see them all. I was a complete novice, and I decided to write an long article about New York theatre, which I succeeded in selling to the Star newspaper in Johannesburg when we came back. This was a major corner, although I didn't realize it then. It was the beginning of a career, and it required chutzpah and passion. I was very nervous approaching the arts editor, but it had to be done. The article covered 2 pages in the Star. It was a big double-page spread with a headline across it. I don't give a damn for Uncle Sam, and I'm not going to Vietnam. That article and a close friend, Doreen Levine, helped me to get a job as a theatre critic for the Jewish Times, as it was then called. I told Doreen that I would be happy to get tickets to all the shows and just to have my work published as payment and just to get the tickets free. I didn't need a fee, but Doreen said no. They must pay you something or else they won't value your work. I got the job and it was very rewarding. The editor gave me other assignments as well, one of which changed my life. He asked me to interview Esme Berman, art critic and author of Art and Artists in South Africa. This was another nerve-wracking time. I was very shy and very insecure, and Esme was quite a formidable subject. If any of you know Esme, she was not an easy person, especially when I knew so little. Esme later invited me to spend a month in New York with her. She taught me about art, not through books, but through examples in New York museums. I was at the Museum of Modern Art and the Guggenheim. It was an unbelievable experience. And Esme predicted I would open an art gallery because she spotted an innate commercial sense that I didn't even know I had. I'd qualified as a lawyer, and I had no such ambitions, but Esme was spot on. She encouraged me to study art, and I received my BA degree majoring in history of art and history of theatre in 1975. This was not a difficult corner, but it needed a change of mindset to make it happen. Corner number 3. Zami and I were in New York when I spotted a gap in the South African art market. I saw a shop full of art posters by the artists I'd been studying. These were artists like David Hockney, Jim Dine, Chagall, Miro, but they were impossible. They were too expensive to ever bring them to South Africa and sell them. But here were the art posters were $25, which at that stage was 25 Rand each, and I thought this is a great idea to start a new business, which I called the Poster Shop, and it was the beginning of the process. I could not have imagined at the time that I would open an art gallery. But we started off in a small way without having major expenses. I formed a partnership with David Crutt, and we opened the Natalie Night Gallery in St. Andrews. We exhibited the work of Andy Warhol, David Hockney, Jim Dine, and Richard Hamilton. I called the show Whatever Happened to Pop Art. At the opening of the show, we served Campbell's soup and hot dogs, and we tried to lure a new audience to my out-of-town venue, which was in the refurbished garage of my new home in St. Andrews. We had purchased a set of silkscreens signed by Warhol and Mick Jagger for the opening. David and I decided we wanted to meet Andy Warhol on our next trip to New York. I remember that day so well. It was in the mid-80s, and we stood on the sidewalk waiting for the taxi to take us to the factory. When we got there, Andy Warhol was busy taking a photograph of a celebrity who I didn't know, but we later identified was Wayne Gretzky, who was a famous ice hockey star from Canada. The story with Warhol himself was a bit disappointing because he was a bit of a nebbish, I suppose, at that stage, and we tried to get him to come to South Africa, and the demands that he and his entourage made were just not realistic. But we did buy a lot more of his works. In addition, I wanted to meet David Hockney. After I'd been to London in 1975, I actually heard about his work. I saw the work and I fell in love with it. And I reported on David Hockney because I was writing for The Star at that stage. And I remember writing in the article, this was a little known artist working in London at this point. I was later able to meet Hockney and interviewed him in 1983 at the Andre Emmerich Gallery in New York. My article, Face to Face with artist David Hockney, was published in the Sunday Express with a full colour picture of his work on the cover. I prepared a detailed catalogue with essays on his work, and I tried to teach people about art in the way that I would have liked to understand it when I was starting off. At that first show, he had also given me a whole lot of drawings on consignment. If I had taken every piece of work and I put it away under my bed in a drawer somewhere in a bank, I could have been a multi-millionaire today. We never know what life throws at us. I thought that success meant that we were selling everything that was on the walls, we were replacing them, people were rushing to buy the work. Success was that we had found an artist who was fantastic and the public agreed with us. So where would I have been if I had just kept the Hockneys? This way, I didn't invest in the money, but I invested in myself and in a career. So I was later able to move my gallery from this converted garage in my home to a little basement in Balducci's restaurant in Rosebank. And then I went to the upmarket area of Hyde Park Corner. Gerard Coct, one of the top designers, designed the gallery, and I loved every moment of it. It was fantastic. We displayed a variety of international artists in Gerard's pink and lilac confection with grey carpets and striking brass entrance with the NK logo on it, carved out in brass on the glass doors. And I worked 12 hours a day. Saturdays and Sundays, we had openings once a month. And people said to me, well, what do you do? I mean, you buy the picture, you hang it on the wall, you sell it, and you move on. It was very hard work, I can tell you. And there were a lot of problems. I'm not going to go into them, I'll just mention one. I was busy selling a Jim Dine to a client. I'd been trying to get him in for weeks, and his wife finally brought him in, and he was looking at this work and about to buy it when they had a big bang. And he said, thinking of this was a quick way to escape, there must be a bomb. I said, how can there be a bomb? And I said, you know what, if there is a bomb, you're in the safest place, because in this basement of Hyde Park Shopping Centre, we had a complete concrete ceiling. It was like being in a bomb shelter. Well, he accepted my argument, and more than that, he bought the work. I was busy writing the invoice when somebody came rushing down, one of my staff members, and said, there's a bomb in Hyde Park Shopping Centre, and we had to close the gallery. So there were lots of difficulties, but nevertheless, we worked through them and it was all wonderful. And then one of the major highlights was an exhibition that I held in New York. The artist that I selected at that time was also not a very well-known artist called William Kentridge. And I also had some other artists, black artists, Thomas Hoppe, Alfred Tober, all of whom have subsequently done well. It was in New York again in 1997 when two of my major interests coalesced. And this was with a show of Ndebele images, which I called Then and Now. I showcased the contemporary art of the black artists who I'd been promoting at the Natalie Gallery with examples of the traditional Ndebele beadwork. I held this at the National Arts Club in New York. And Esther Mahlangu, artistic queen of the Ndebele, exhibited with us, and I had a partner, Suzanne Prebach, and the show at the National Arts Club in New York was also a great success. Suzanne and I had been researching the Ndebele culture from the mid-70s. It was in Middelburg that we photographed the then unknown Esther Mahlangu. Her photograph was published in our first Ndebele catalogue called Ndebele Images. This Ndebele research was also very difficult, lots of hard work, and again it was something where I was a little bit too ahead of my time because at that stage nobody was interested in the Ndebele. But there were many exciting times at the Natalie Gallery. I'm only going to give you one example. This was when I had the drawing of one of our black artists who was also deaf, called Tommy Motswai. And he did this drawing of de Klerk and Nelson Mandela. And I heard that Nelson Mandela was in the shopping center. So I hadn't quite overcome my shyness, although I was a lot better at this stage. But nevertheless, it was not easy to go, waiting for him to come out of the Ballard's stationery shop. And when I saw him emerging, surrounded by his bodyguards, I went up to him and I said, "I'm Natalie Knight, and I've got a fantastic artwork of you by one of my black artists. Would you be prepared to have a look at it?" And he said, "Sure, where is it?" And I said, "There it is." And there it was, hanging on the wall of my gallery. So he came over, and it was just something that you never forget, because not only was he friendly and warm and unaffected, but he just had this grace about him and this towering presence that people talk about, but you actually have to experience to understand how it was. It was also his kindness, because I had 15 people working for me in the framing factory, because I had this 2 levels in the gallery. And they all came up and they all wanted to shake hands with him. And he shook hands with all of them. And the bodyguards were getting very edgy, and he said, "No, no, no." And then he asked me a question. He said, "How much is the painting?" Well, I was so shocked. I couldn't even think about that. I was in a different world completely. We subsequently did sell him the painting, and it's somewhere in his collection. And I've also got this photograph of Mandela in the gallery that day in the book. And subsequently, you can see here I am shaking hands with him, and there is the drawing behind. And in the photograph below, I had various artists working with me. One was called Billy Makabela, and he instructed his wife, who was a beautiful bead maker, to make a beaded work from this item. And this is Bernard Jerzek, who is the photographer who took the original photograph of me and Mandela, which I have to tell you was published first in the Sunday Times and later in Der Spiegel in Germany, because there was a rumor that Mandela and de Klerk were going to be given the Nobel Prize for Peace, and that rumor was true. And they needed a photograph, and that was the photograph. So Just when I was riding the crest of this commercial wave, running the successful gallery in Hyde Park, I found myself being drawn towards a deeper exploration of my Jewish faith. I have to admit that I experienced incredible emotional turmoil and pain when I closed the Natalie Knight Gallery. My self-identity and reputation revolved around my involvement with art, and the gallery fed this ego and the need that I had for recognition and to feel important. Keeping Shabbos was a tremendous challenge. Saturday, after all, was the busiest day of the week. That was the day the wives finally managed to drag their husbands into the gallery. And my clients were very annoyed when they came in. I tried various ways, putting somebody into the gallery to assist me, but they weren't interested. They tried to phone me, and I was either at shul, or Zami took the calls and said I wasn't available. As a first stepping stone towards closing the gallery, I opened an interim space called the Art Source. This was in Rivera Killarney, and here I had the freedom of movement, and I could decide which days to stay open. There was no lease to insist that I open on the Sabbath or Jewish holidays like there was at the Hyde Park Shopping Centre. I have to admit that this put a bit of strain on our marriage. Zami did not become Shomei Shabbat when I did. I tried not to put any pressure on him, but I hoped that he would come to it of his own accord. He did, but he said, well, you are frum by conviction and I'm frum by coercion, which is a Zami phrase which isn't actually true. When he finally decided to do it, I think he really wanted to do it. But it was a very difficult day. The one day when Zami had to get rid of all his non-kosher wine. He had beautiful rare vintages and he treasured these over many years. It was also a bit traumatic when a rabbi arrived with a blowtorch to kosher and clean the kitchen. Zami later told me that one of his partners had passed a remark that he should have just divorced me because of this hold that I had on him. This was such a change in our relationship because in the beginning he was very dominant and very, very controlling. Anyway, we then decided to move from Rivera to Glen Hazel. And although Zami was a bit resistant, I explained to him we were very happy wherever he was. He had been happy when we were in Germiston and in St. Andrews, and he loved Rivera, and each move was for a reason, and that's what life is all about. You have to take these difficult steps and move on, and as long as you can do it together. But Glen Hazel was the best move of all, because it was wonderful being with our children and grandchildren. Cheryl, our oldest daughter and Zami's law partner, and her two sons lived in the adjoining townhouse complex. Alan and Shane, who Zami calls our son the Frummer, and their 8 children lived in close walking distance, and I was able to spend a lot of time with them. And our middle son, Julian, who was also a lawyer, but when he emigrated to Canada, became my partner and took over a lot of the selling in the Natalie Knight Gallery. The international branch is called Knight Galleries International. But then I decided to make the greatest sacrifice of my life. I wanted to completely retire from my art career. I just abandoned years of involvement and immersed myself completely in studying and attending shiurim. I really needed to learn more. Some of the biblical commands just didn't make sense. There was no intellectual logic in it, and others didn't fit in with my democratic liberal ideas. At first I rebelled against the dictum to do something against my nature because Hashem said so. I had to come to this acceptance slowly. I started by observing the 10 commandments, then working my way through the other 600 and something laws, and I've got a long way to go. I discovered there was a course in Kabbalah and Tanya at Chabad House. The very first lecture, Rabbi Masinta, eyes fell on me and he looked at me and he couldn't remember my name, but he said, aren't you the art person? I said, yes. You know, with a name like Lignatsky, you say yes to everything. So what are you doing here, he inquired. I came to study Kabbalah, I replied. No, 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 said Rabbi Masinto. If the Eibishter put you in the position that you're well known in the art world, you are not able to give it up. That is your mission, and you have to pursue it. Well, I was absolutely shocked. I thought he would be really delighted that here I was giving up the secular world, but that wasn't what he had in mind. So it was the last Kabbalah lecture I attended, and I did persevere with some of my religious studies and shiurim, but I pursued my career now as a curator, a researcher, and a writer. And the big picture was starting to emerge. Life has been described as a giant tapestry, but we can only see the back of the cloth. Lots of knots and loose threads. Areas of color and darkness are created through pinpricks and pain. We don't have the opportunity to fully see the big picture created on the other side of the tapestry during our lifetimes. But it was very interesting because some of the threads of my life came together in June 2016 when Rabbi Beryl Wine and Rabbi Lawrence Perez introduced me at a talk before I gave at the World Mizrahi Hall in Jerusalem. It was very interesting synergy again with you, Les, because it's a long story where we had a lot of interactions and complications, but I don't know how you organized for Rabbi Wine to come and be at this lecture, but it was quite an amazing achievement.
Natalie, just very briefly, because you mentioned it's actually because of you, because you were the one that encouraged me. You made the meeting with Peter and Mayer from the WITS alumni, and I'm indebted, eternally grateful to you, because we established the WITS in Israel, and it was because of you. It was your insight and your vision, and you made it happen. So
I've always been very fortunate just to find these opportunities and these avenues, but it's one thing to make an approach, but you had to have somebody at the other end to actually take it up and make it work, and that's what you did.
Well, you said you wanted your two favorite rabbis,
yeah.
And we made it happen, thank God, because you deserved it, because people wanted to be there, and they both very much wanted to be there.
No, it was quite amazing. And it was also under the auspices of the WITS alumni. So all these different aspects came together on that night, and it was really a magical night. And the lecture I called it The Fruits of the Long Walk to Freedom. It was Mandela's story, which was told through all the different works of art, including this work behind me. I don't know if you can see it.
You can see it. It's in the background.
In the background, it's a magnificent piece of the moment that Mandela walked out of prison the first time, thinking about what freedom meant. At that lecture, there were a lot of WITS alumni, people who had known me from the days in Natalie Night Gallery. And then later I gave the talk again at the Beit Protea retirement home, where my mother Edith Lees and my stepfather A.B. Lees had spent a decade. After the lecture, I met an old school friend who asked me incredulously, she said, what on earth possessed you to give up everything that you had worked for? You had such a fantastic lifestyle and you loved it. And then you took on all these restrictions of religion. Your life was so exciting. And now this is such an anticlimax. It was a very interesting moment for me. I suppose it would have been more dramatic if I had run away with a toy boy, if I had planned a parachute jump when I turned 78 or 80, but that's fact and not fiction. This is fact and it's not fiction. So how does one explain to a non-believer the incredible pleasure that I have derived from our new anticlimax, as she called it? It was a choice, it was a calling, and I followed it against all logic and reason. I've always been fascinated by African spirituality. On one of our earliest field trips, when we were researching the Ndebele and the Tsonga Shangaan, we consulted a Sangoma because Zami was having trouble with his legs. We had no idea that this was not allowed in Judaism. When I had a bad headache and backache, I was given a red dream cloth, which the Sangoma had treated with special herbs. This dream cloth was included in the hypnotic dream sequence in There's No Sugar Left, a play which I wrote and was produced at the Market Theatre. And also, that image is on the cover of the book, The Big Picture. This is the image by Norman Catherine, which was which he designed for the play which I wrote called There's No Sugar Left at the Market Theatre. But I was fascinated by spirituality, and I felt I was in a similar situation to the Sangomas. They were also suddenly called to follow a path they had no intention of following. And I was grateful that I had not been impelled by sickness or bad dreams, but I was drawn by an inexorable force along a very pleasant path and a very stimulating journey. It was as though I was rushing along a fast-flowing river, and the very impetus made the trip possible and turning back impossible. A strong belief in a divine force was not foreign to my nature. I agree with the poet Wordsworth, who said, "The child is father of the man." I really believe that the essence of the child remains throughout his or her life. And I can really relate to that shy young girl that I was, who enjoyed curling up with a good book after a good meal, loved saying her prayers every night, and I was a real little prude. I hated bad language and hugs from strangers. This is not far from living an orthodox life. In fact, closing the gallery proved to be liberating. I was removing the shackles, not putting them on. I was given so many opportunities, from being the art curator at WITS for 4 years. I put works into buildings on the West Campus where a lot of the commerce and law students were now working. I researched and wrote books. I curated many shows. Several of them were Mandela related, first at the Constitutional Court in Johannesburg on his 90th birthday, and Mandela invited me and the artists to visit him in his Houghton office. Got a picture of that visit as well. This wasn't the best professional photograph, unfortunately, but because when we arrived, the person at the desk took away all our cameras and said, "Sorry, no photographs allowed." So they could see the tremendous disappointment, especially in the faces of these black artists who'd been part of the show. And they relented and they said, "Okay, just one camera, just one photograph." This was the one they took on my camera. You can see from their faces, it looked like they were meeting the king, which I suppose they were. Another very definite highlight of my career, and I'll end with this, was a live interview on the BBC with George Alagaya. I had organized a very complicated, I would say, show in in London at the South African Embassy. This was with Alan Denby, who I met one evening, and I didn't know who he was, and he knew I was involved with Mandela, and he said to me, "Would you like to do a Mandela show with me in London?" And I said, "Yes." And when I got home, Zami said to me, "What do you mean, yes? Do you know what that means?" I said, "Yes, at this stage I've had enough experience to know what that means, and yes, I do want to do it." He said, "And how?" I said, "That's what will be the problem, but we'll manage," and we did. And the show was really fantastic success. Although nothing was for sale, just seeing the faces of the people who came to see these artworks and remembered South Africa and remembered Mandela, it was worth every single penny, every single effort, and every single minute. So, to sum up, the 4 corners that I turned with you today represent, first, the personal. the circumstances beyond my control when I was 16 and I lost my father. The second was the creative drive. The third was the professional, the business and the material success. And the fourth was giving it all up, looking at the spiritual side and the search for meaning. So I feel that the most difficult corner, closing the gallery to keep Shabbat, was in fact the best thing I could have done. The current corner I'm turning is probably another one where a lot of people would relate to. I recently presented the big picture at the Jewish Literary Festival in Cape Town. One of the questions was very pertinent. The question was, how do I slow down and accept that I can't do what I used to? And I answered that it was much easier going up the ladder than starting to the descent. So the question was, when does one give up? And the answer is never. But one has to recognize and adapt to the circumstances. Change gear, change pace, and change direction. I think I should stop here.
Not at all. I just want to mention to our listeners
Yes.
that Natalie, that very shy girl, you still are very modest. You might not be shy, but you're extremely modest. In 2014, you received a grant from the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. to assist in the research on your collection of Ndebele from the Smithsonian. That's an incredible achievement.
That was a major, and also what is happening now is that we've donated all our research material to the Smithsonian, and the material that we collected in the 70s, which obviously is now quite valuable, is now on the Smithsonian website. So thank you for mentioning that.
And even more, I think, amazing than that is in the same year, CEO Magazine, you were awarded the most influential woman in business and government awards for a Lifetime Achievement Award in the arts and culture section. I think that is something that is really, really remarkable and very well deserving. And your illustrious career, it's just incredible. There really are no words to describe what you've achieved, your path, your direction. It's incredible. And you are somebody we can all strive to emulate, really. You are, not only do you have a vision, but you take action on that vision and you make things happen. And I'm personally very grateful for what you've done for me with Wits in Israel. It was your vision and it became a reality. And we just wish you and Zami and your family all the mazel and bracha at Me'ah V'Esrim to 120, and as the late Chief Rabbi Hirsi said, plus VAT.
And
but you should have
Natalie
mazel,
Lignatsky says, with good health.
exceptionally good health, happiness, mazel and bracha, and just to continue in your amazing things that you do and what you achieve, and to enjoy your family, your dear family, and the community and everybody who has the privilege to know you, because it really is a privilege.
Thank you very much, Les. It was a privilege to know you, and thank you very much for recording the talk tonight.
It's been wonderful. Okay, here we are with the icon of art, Natalie, in her home, Natalie Knight. And Natalie, your home is like an art gallery.
Well,
It's
it should be.
magnificent.
I just wanted to tell you about this beautiful work behind me. It's by an artist called Valapi Mazimba, who I really started from his very earliest part of his career. And this work was on the show in London called We Love Mandela. And I said to Valapi, just any work that inspires you. The show is called Art Inspired by Madiba, and We Love Mandela was the theme which Alan Demby came up with, because that fitted very well with his theme with the coins that he was doing with
The Mandela
Mandela.
coins.
So Valapi said he found this old door, saw it lying in his garage. What he liked about it was that the hinges were off, that the bolt was shot, and then he had a picture in his mind of Mandela coming out of his cell. And he took the quote from Mandela's book, which said, "I knew at the moment that I walked out of the prison that if I didn't leave my anger and bitterness behind, I'd be a prisoner forever. And what was very interesting, can you do a close-up here?
That was the long walk to freedom.
Yes. But his head here is still behind the bars.
Oh, look, it's super, it's...
He used the bars of the wood to show that, but his thinking, his forehead, is now looking forward, and he's no longer feeling like he's a prisoner. As he walks out, he's leaving those bars behind him.
That is amazing.
And this is the 27 years that he spent in prison, and he walked out of there as a free man. I think it's a really interesting work.
It's spectacular. Wow.
I just switching off. This work on my left is another work by the same artist, Biography Mazimba. It's very interesting because he has this wonderful ability to do realistic works, and in addition, his abstract ideas. He called this work The Artist, and you can see he's still got his paintbrush in it. And it's a very different feel to the other work that you saw.
And there's the work. You're right, they're very, very different. They're both amazing.
While we're on the theme of Mandela, let's do this one. One of the Mandela works, which was done by a young artist called Colin Maswangani, and he called Mandela more than a lawyer. And as you can see, he's got his idea of the jiving, the dancing, and his lawyer's gown, but he is certainly more than a lawyer. And this one here is too heavy to carry, but it's by Richard Chauke, and it's also the moment that Mandela de Klerk, it was a historic handshake which the artist did with the two hands right up in the air. They are way too long for any natural hands, but he was showing that unity at that moment. And what's interesting is that the color of the faces, the skin is, in both cases, is exactly the same. The suits are the same. The ties, the grey suits, the black shoes, everything is exactly the same. So that is equality and unity, de Klerk and Mandela. Behind me is a very beautiful plate, a ceramic made by Pablo Picasso. He had a studio in Vallauris, and he made these beautiful plates. They signed in the back, and there was an edition, I can't remember, there may be about 100 of these, but they are quite valuable because they really are very beautiful. This is his description of the bullfight, and as you can see, it's a lovely natural terracotta with the black, which gives it a really beautiful Spanish feel. This photograph on my left is by a Cape Town artist photographer called Paul Weinberg, and he's captured this wonderful feeling of Mandela actually that moment when he was jiving and moving to the music. I mean, that was a completely natural, unposed, spontaneous moment.
And this is the original picture?
Yeah.
The photograph?
Yeah. This work behind me is by Susan Wolf, who is a South African artist who really created a 12th language. It was the taxi hand signs. She worked on it for 9 years. She got her PhD doing it, and behind here is the whole dictionary of all the taxi hand signs. And she's also created a symbol of what a person who is blind, how they would be able to feel that sign and know which way to call the taxi. I'll see if I can give you a better example.
Natalie, you know, she did a series of stamps,
yes,
and it was voted the world's best stamp in the
She
year
was one of
that she issued.
the 5th best in the world in 2010. She did these beautiful stamps, and they also have got this raised,
That's the
embossed
yeah, it's embossed.
feeling over here. So like you can feel this, and you know that this triangle is the palm of the hand, and this is one finger. So this person is going wherever that place is. It's
a language.
They understand that language of being the palm and the one finger. It's going to a specific destination. But the stamps that she created were really beautiful.
You know, we donated the stamps to the Israeli Philatelic Federation, and there's the article. It was written up in the article.
Fantastic.
And it's in Tel Aviv, in the Israeli Philatelic Federation, with a picture of Susan. It's in the main Philatelic Federation offices in Tel Aviv.
And also she exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art in an exhibition called Talk to Me. She's very well thought of internationally. But being South African, you know, a prophet in her own country, she's still struggling to get that recognition here. This is just an example without the glass of one of the works.
And
her work is so impeccable, it's so meticulous, it's so fantastically, you know, beautifully executed.
She also had some items on the We Love Mandela. They went to London. Yeah, it's impeccable.
So this is a whole book that she did with the different sounds.
And she obtained a PhD.
Yes, she got a doctorate now, based on this research. And she first said to me that she was doing these taxi hand signs and she was doing a PhD. I said, I couldn't understand what she was talking about. Firstly, what did this have to do with art? And secondly, how was she going to do it? But she draws so beautifully, and she was able to really capture it in such a brilliant way. And she's made a real contribution to South African art.
But she went to interview the taxi drivers.
Yeah, she interviewed them, she went and she did so much for the blind people. At one of the evenings when she was discussing this, one of the blind men came up to me and he said, he's very, I won't say he's completely blind, but has difficulty seeing. And he said to me, I can't believe that a beautiful woman like this would even bother about whether I could take a taxi or not. And he was really very moved by her whole approach. This work on my left is by a black artist called Sam Hlengetwe. He's very talented. It does not look in any way primitive as some of the black artists have been described. In fact, their work is not primitive at all. Even when they use their raw emotion, it is very much coming from the heart. But Sam's is a much more structured and intellectual approach, and he uses collage to get these fantastic effects.
There's like a 3D effect.
Yeah, can you see? I'd say he's one of the top artists at the moment. And do you want to do that other one?
And you knew him when he was starting out?
No, he wasn't one of my discoveries. I'll show you another one of my discoveries. This is a work by Sam. And what he's done is, he called it a tribute to Kentridge, but he's created various works as homage to a specific artist, taking a couch and creating a room in order to show how he feels that artist would have reacted in those circumstances. The works in his picture are works that Kentridge could have created but didn't quite. And the one here on the right is Kentridge emerging from water. It was from one of his films, and there was a lot of that particular aspect in the show that he did in Israel. I think it was the Israel
Museum in Jerusalem.
And there's a beautiful poster that he did of also Kentridge standing in water. I have to show you this one. This is the poster that Norman Catherine did when I commissioned him to do a poster for my play called There's No Sugar Left. It was at the upstairs at the Market Theatre, and these were the people who were involved in it, the actors and the director, Benji Francis. And the theme was very important because that red cloth was the dream cloth that I had used when I went to see the Sangoma. And it also represented my law career. It was justice is blind, all the eyes are covered. And I also loved this long neck. That was why I chose it as a cover for my book, because it also spoke about the underbelly and the elegance of the African people. And then this barbed wire, the fences, was really what South Africa was about at that time, with apartheid and keeping people
It was in
separate.
1981.
Yeah, 1981.
That was during apartheid,
Yeah.
long before 94.
Very much in apartheid.
Yeah.
That was what the play was about, that we don't understand the cultures of the people, that particularly those that work for us, and we have such different views, and I called it No Sugar Left because the white culture is insurance, think about the future. Black culture is when you have an animal and you have a wedding and a festivity, you kill the animal and you eat it all up. Like a nice Jewish woman would make soup from the bones, would make biltong, would freeze it, would cook it and save it for another day. They believe there's no sugar left because yesterday there was sugar, and that's the joke that of course we all make.
Well, can I just ask, were you nervous doing the play in 81? I mean,
no, I was never nervous of anything, maybe because I didn't know what I was doing, but I wasn't nervous when I went into the underbelly areas because they were always wonderful to us. I wasn't nervous when I did the play.
No, I mean because of the police and
I wasn't. I don't
the
know.
apartheid regime.
Because at the market, it was okay. You could do
it was
those
a safe
things.
place, yeah.
Yes, it was fine. This was me with Billy Makubela, who is one of the artists who also was a fantastic ability to preserve the cultural heritage of his, we used to call him a tribe, it's now the nation. It's the Tsonga Shangaan Nation. And I wrote a book and a whole show which we organized at the Johannesburg Art Gallery. And these are the actual pieces that the Makubelas have done. Billy has, let me see, can you see?
Yeah.
3 wives and 7 daughters, and they all do different beautiful beaded items for him. And this was a whole theme on Mandela, and he also did a theme on AIDS and on soccer. So whatever was very important historically at the time, they captured in their beadwork. I have a fantastic collection of these. I really feel it's got to go into a museum somewhere.
It's magnificent. Days of Freedom.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
So the pieces on the top of this cupboard are the pieces that Billy collected for me. They're all authentic items created by the Sangomas, who, let me just take this one as an example. This is a medicine container, and this is what you stir the medicine with when you come to see the Sangoma.
And this is an original one?
These are all the original ones. I mean, all of these. What happened was, one of the artists, Johannes Maswangani, saw that I was collecting these old pieces, and he was making new ones. So he went to the Sangomas, and he said, "You don't want these old things. Let me rather give you some nice new ones." And then I bought these old ones from him, which was his.
Wow.
If I can see it. So he managed to get a lot of the old pieces for me.
It's amazing.
This is Maswangani's new works, and they're very commercially, everybody loved them. But when he saw that there was value in these old pieces, he was also a bit of an entrepreneur. He went back and he swapped the new ones and got the old pieces for me. So as you can see, there's a fantastic variety of them. And
this is...
that's Roy and Denisa.
very colourful, very...
Yeah, he carves into the wood, Roy and Denisa. He carves into the wood. He then will print, a black and white print from the carving, and when that's all completed, he then will paint it. So this is the original wood carving, and then there are also various prints that come off that. And this is the one I wanted to show you. I have to take it out of here.
This is a calendar from 2012. These are all the original. Here's where they have all the herbs and the medications.
I could send you some pictures. I don't know if you can put them into the book, you know, like high-res pictures. I don't know if that would be of interest.
This is just wonderful.
But there's a tremendous amount of stuff here. And this is the small storeroom.
And is this from the same?
These are the Ndebele dolls, and these are the Tsonga Shangaan dolls. Zulu, I mean, I've got all of the different cultures. There's the Zulu milk pail, and this is the Ndebele different dolls that they've got, not this one. And down here are the Tsonga Shangaan. It's been a very fascinating study.
And here's Mandela as a boxer.
There's the Mandela as a boxer.
That's that famous hand salute. And these, this is stunning.
It's a whole long story, but this is Colin Maswangani's also. Actually, I don't know if you're interested, but there's all the whole story here in this book. I'll give you this, you can have a look at it. Sorry. Wait, can I go in front of your camera? I just want to get one thing.
Natalie, this is so real. This,
Yeah, isn't it? It's very well done.
and out of what material?
This is wood.
Wow, it's
All carved very hard wood, and then these are the actual beaded.
From which tribe?
The Tsonga Shangaan. So this is what, this is the book Dungamanzi for the show that I did at the Johannesburg Art Gallery.
And this has never been done before.
This was something new. The critic called it mind-breaking. Yes, he called it, anyway, something breaking. I'm getting tired.
But it is, it's you've exposed to the world something that basically was hidden only for the local people.
Yeah, that people really didn't know about it. And I did it with the curator of the South Africa, of the gallery at the Johannesburg Art Gallery, and Billy Makabela. The three of us were the curators. So these are beautiful pieces that were all part of the show. I called it Stirring Waters, Dungamanzi Stirring Waters, because of the fact I showed you that they use that
stir.
long stick to stir.
And they keep the
Actual
medication,
medicine,
all
yeah.
the medicines and the herbs.
They put your DNA, and then you'll see. Let me give you another example. You see, this is a big one. They stir, and then this is another whole collection that was made into a calendar. So people are beginning to appreciate the beauty of the items.
This is wonderful.
It was a groundbreaking show. That's what
groundbreaking.
Yes.
And unique, and
I had more energy in those days. This is one of the earliest Kentridges that I bought. It was from a portfolio called Industry and Idleness, and it's a beautiful work, as you can see, the etchings. And at that stage, Kentridge was not at all well known, but he had done this beautiful portfolio with Deborah Bell and Hodgins, Robert Hodgins. So I kept a couple of the pieces.
so you basically you discovered Kentridge.
No, I didn't discover Kentridge, but I worked with him at an early stage of his career.
But
He wasn't yet internationally known.
But maybe you made him international.
No.
Yes,
He went to Goodman Gallery. I can't claim that one. I could
But
claim lots of
you had an
others.
influence. You had a big
Yeah.
influence.
And then this is the very first Ndebele piece that I collected on one of our trips in 1976. It's the first piece, so I could never part with it. Although my original collection, which has been catalogued into this book called Ndebele Images, was acquired by the Wits Art Museum. It's there at the moment as part of their collection. But this was a special piece. The first, the earliest, and a beautiful early piece with tiny little beads. And it's an apron that the women wear in front of their blanket which surrounds them. When I was trying to do a book on this, I was rejected. Everybody, look, it was too early. But they said, we're not interested in women's underwear. And this is basically what it was, her apron. So this is the one I did discover. No, I made him really. He's called Alfred Toba, and I've just organised a show of his work at the Wits Art Museum, a whole retrospective. He's a very controversial artist, but he's also he's a very emotional artist. I'll show you the final piece that he did very recently. I don't know, sometimes this gets a funny shine. Is it okay on your
That's
flesh?
very good.
Okay. So he was madly in love with a woman called Sweetness, and he was engaged to her, and she passed away. And Alfred is an absolute master of drawing trees, and whatever trees he draws seems to express the emotion in that particular piece. So he did this work, and he called it the Garden of Sweetness. Sweetness is buried somewhere here, and these are the trees protecting her, and then the flowers that are growing all around her. A lot of his work is very political, it's very critical of the various governments, but this is just one of those pieces that comes pouring right out of his soul. I love the way he does the textures of on the paint. He just gets such tremendous quality. Look at these leaves, can you see?
It like comes alive.
Yeah, it really is quite an amazing work. And I think this is going to be, well, not only me, but he's considered to be one of the very important black artists working at the moment.
Thank you.
This piece is by Alan Jones. He's a very important British artist. It's a beautiful sculpture on painted wood. He's bent the wood and then painted it. And he creates these dancing figures that are completely interwoven. And he became famous or infamous because he was the artist who was asked to do the backdrop and the sets for the Clockwork Orange. He also became very famous because he did a coffee table, and the base of the table was a woman on her knees. So they considered him to be a bit of a, I don't know, misogynist, I suppose. But in fact, he said he was a pop artist and he was really doing this to get people to look at what was happening to women. I have quite a lot of internet. This is Ray Vessels, who does beautiful ceramic work, and this looks almost as though it's cloth. She's made it a very delicate way. This is, the bigger piece is by Zoltan Boborecki, and this was his son, called Daniel Kovacs. Kovacs didn't want to take the name Boborecki because he wanted to make it on his own, and he did. And then the next three pieces are called Ngovanis. They're the medicine containers that I've shown you, but they're very big ones, so they're more like, they call them gonos, because they're not just made from calabashes, but actually carved out of wood. This one here, you can see it's a calabash, but the proportions are so beautiful. And then here is the stirrer again,
that's amazing.
stirring the water. And these are, some of these are the works that were on display at the Johannesburg Art Gallery with the Dungamanzi show.
And this is so cute with these little figures.
The one at the end I found at the market very recently, and I just thought if I was still in the business, this guy's definitely got talent. But unfortunately, or fortunately, he didn't come to the gallery because by then I'd given up.
Oh, Natalie, thank
And
you so much.
most of the artists aren't grateful. They, very expect things to happen. But these artists here, a nice way to end. I opened the show. So thank you for opening our show, The Measure of Success, Colin Johannes Maswangani. And they made this special sculpture for me because it was the symbol of the father, Johannes Maswangani, handing over the tools of his trade to his son. And I opened the show, and we've remained very good friends ever since. This is an international artist, Armstrong. So as you can see, it's very eclectic. There's a lot of different pieces all over. And I just think if it's a beautiful piece, it doesn't matter where it comes from.
That's true.
And I think that the South African artists are really have done brilliantly.
It is. It's so beautiful, and it's really very special.
Yeah.
And it has each piece has such significance and meaning.
It is. It's hard to part with it, but in the end, there's only so much that I can hang on my walls, and I just feel now's the time. I have to part with them and move on to something else.
But in a nice way, the people that will be purchasing or will be obtaining these items, they will enjoy it, and they will pass it on to their families, and will continue.
When I spoke to one of the artists, it was a dealer, and I said, I had this and I should never have sold my Warhol that. He said, think of it as treasures through your hands. And I suppose that's the way I have to look at it, because these are treasures through my hands. Temporarily, they're on my walls, but ultimately, they're in the book and they're on other people's walls.
And everybody's enjoying them. But this is really, it's such a lovely tribute.
Yeah,